Yeah, so I'm the Chief Operating Officer at iTIC Incubator at IIT Hyderabad. We are a deep tech incubator, and also share why we are doing this debriefing is because that's what I and another professor from IIT Hyderabad realized about a year back, that this report matters a lot to the ecosystem, and that's how we started doing this. So Atit have been a good friend and a collaborator to the ecosystem, have been adding a lot to ecosystem. So we used some connections, got a hold of him. So this is the second year we are doing this. Okay. And I'll ask Atit a few questions, but if there are more questions from the attendees, I will also like to take them in the Q&A section, or even if it is in the chat, I'll try to read it out to Atit. So Atit, first thing is we as we can see it in the report as well, the flavor has changed. Okay, so we can see a few humps, like something's going down, something's going up. You explained us very well that how the difference is, but in a nutshell, what are the sectors now and which we should focus on in next 1 or 2 years as an ecosystem, not from the government perspective or industry perspective, as an ecosystem perspective, which are the sectors that are going to grow up and we should build a better ecosystem for them?
I think Dhruv, some of the sectors like say retail, healthcare, education, financial services, enterprise, these are areas where we'll always see a good amount of funding going in. But that being said, to your point, there are certain areas where there is an India advantage, is how I would call it, right? So let's take, for example, we have one of the largest developer base in the world, right?
Yeah.
Most number of GitHub participants come, I think, from, biggest growth is in India. I think we'll soon reach the China and US levels. So there's a critical mass there. So I think anything which is focused on developers is a very good segment to go into India as an edge. Similarly, when you look at small and medium businesses, they operate a very different price point compared to a large enterprise. Indian SMBs contribute significant percentage to the national economy.
Yeah.
They are transforming themselves digitally, and they need newer solutions because they also have a very, very big talent problem now. People don't want to join parents' business or uncle's business. They want to go and work for a Google, right? So smart people don't always go to the SMB sector, right? But they need solutions. They're critical to the economy. Similarly, I would take for example, something like agriculture or climate or aviation, defense, or life sciences. Now, the reason I'm picking up these particular sectors is because India as a buyer, whether it is consumer or say the government, operates at a very different price point, right? So we have an unmet need, we have a very urgent need, but we don't have solutions that we can afford at scale. Now, that is a recipe for disruption because you have a lot of smart people in the ecosystem who can now build solutions which will get adopted. And adoption will bring in investment. So to your point, I think I would go with areas where India has an edge over the world. Focus on that because what you're going after is a critical mass of the market, which has unmet needs, which has urgent needs, and is looking for a new business model innovation, technology innovation for it to be catered to. It follows the S curve where you get early adopters, which funds you for you to keep building the solution and then take on the global competition. And that part, I think, we have a lot of sectors to look into.
So do you think aerospace and defense is one of those sectors?
I think so. I'll give a small example. Let's just take from a defense perspective, right? There's no way we're going to outspend our biggest neighbor, right? So we have to be smart in terms of how we defend ourselves, right? So we can't add more planes, but can we add more drones? Can we add better swarm tactics? We can't add more submarines, but can we add swarm submarines, right? So it's a huge envelope of things, right, that you can go for. Similarly, agriculture, right, which is there, but take for example aviation. We have the same problem. We have a lot of airports. There will be a lot of transit, but then you have to rethink what kind of plane would really work on those particular pieces. Space is our aspirational part. It's becoming more and more important for you to own the technologies end to end, including your own GPS systems. We have been doing that. But then again, there's a lot of room to create that independency from a communication perspective. So I think there's a lot of groundwork which has happened. Good stories are coming out. I think Idea Forge is going into listing, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, for sure. I think there's a long way to go, but the government policies, the demand puts us in the right space.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll take a first question from the Q&A section. It is, what is your view on the impact of SVB collapse on the Indian startup story? Okay, so.
Yeah, I think it's a short-term impact. It's not a long-term impact. SVB is a very good business. They have made a mistake this time around, but remember the bank was around for a very long time. There's some very interesting products with a JP Morgan, or a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America cannot offer in terms of, say, collateral-less loans and debt facilities. They understand the ecosystem really well. And that's why you have seen the whole ecosystem. So many customers not actually blame them, but say that, hey, look, I'll move all of my deposits back to SVB if somebody comes and buys it, right? So I think FDIC understands that part. Investors understand that part. Ecosystem understands that part. And SVB acquisition should happen sooner than later. And it's back to normal. The issue is more at an ecosystem level. It's more interim. It's a short-term bank. There could be fallouts, but that's, I think, more company specific as to how one company decided its cash flow, or whether it was in part of a deal or not part of a deal, or it was the last week of operations. There would be some victims in this whole story. But at an ecosystem level, I think we are okay. Yeah.
And I think particularly on the India front, there will not be much impact. I know a few people who are stuck or trying to raise a bridge round just to pay the salaries this month. But I think the number will not be bigger, and it is not going to impact much larger amount. Right?
Yeah, I think if they have already raised a round, it's important to go back to your investors, at least in US, and some of the larger VCs in India are giving that funds to their startups. Then you have, platforms like Recovery, which are giving revenue-based financing or, SaaS financing for some of the pieces. So I don't want to undermine the pain of it. But yeah, I think when I zoom into a company level, we'll see some problems. At the ecosystem level, it should still be okay. I think our exposure to SVB is less than 5 to 10% of all the funding. So the estimate is that $2 to $3 billion of $70 billion.
The challenge was SVB is the preferred bank for YC, and for Indian startups, YC is the preferred incubator or accelerator in US. Yeah, so there's an ecosystem in itself, which is of YC startups in Bangalore, which I go and meet people, and then they all are in trouble, like this thing, like paisa tak gaya yaar, and all those things are happening.
That happens. I mean, there's definitely pain for sure. But I think it's still the important part for all of us is to sort of just not take actions assuming the whole banking system is going to collapse, because what Credit Suisse problem is happening in Europe is very different from the SVB problem.
Yeah,
is very different. So that contextualization is important. Yeah.
So there is another side to it, that is the increasing interest rates, which are also hampering the investment. That is one sentiment which is coming out to. Where are you on that? As the interest rates are increasing, is it going to impact startup funding as well, or it's not?
I think it definitely reduces the pool of capital available to VC or private equity, which is there. I think one of the reasons in the last 2-3 years we have seen the private equity boom happening, the VC boom happening, is because there was no other alternative. Tech was going up. In that sense, because the world has now opened up, if you see 2022, anybody who had invested in energy in January of 2022 will be sitting on a gold mine right now, because that industry has just gone up, right? So a lot of older sectors have come back. I think where a lot of us went wrong was to assume that whatever has changed in COVID will perpetuate through entirety of our generation, which is not true. Behaviors don't change that quickly also. So yes, I think in terms of at a hedge fund level, at a late stage level, it's going to be a bit challenging, because now you have newer funds not getting created. You also have existing funds, dealing with this whole IRR issue because the valuations they invested in versus the current valuations are very, very different.
Yeah.
So it's going to slow down the dry capital at the top level, but at seed early, I don't expect a change. I think impact will be at the late stage part, but even then, there's significant amount of capital available. The other part is that will the Fed continue to increase the rate, right? I think we are at 4.5% kind of a bit right now. It's anticipated that if they end up increasing more, it's just going to increase the banking exposure. So there is something to learn from the SVP part for the Feds as to what will happen. So yes and no. I think the new fund creation will slow down for sure, but the existing commitments should still sort of come through. That shouldn't be a problem.
I think in case of SVB, there at the Feds, it happened very rapidly. Like they moved from 0 to 3 in a very short time, which is not going to happen in India.
Correct.
Yeah. So I'll be taking another. Yes, please. Yes, I think.
I think the funny part with the SVB was also that this problem could have been contained. But what really happened was because they have such a small customer base, as soon as one got to know that this is a problem, they asked their companies to withdraw, and then those people spoke to somebody, they spoke to somebody. So the run of the bank happened because of smart people, but it happened because of chambers and social media. Like it's very interesting what the behavior.
Like I'm telling you, it's a very small community of founders, and not just the number of customers are small; they're very close knit. So SVB customer is actually recommended by at least 4 or 5 people that okay, you go and use SVB as your banking partner. So it's a very close knit community. So that's why the bank run happened. Yeah. So I'll go to the next question I have, and that is more on you also showcased how the corporates are trying to leverage startups now. And what do you think where the shift is going to be there? Is it more on the acqui-hiring because talent is a bigger challenge, but we see something really opposite on the polls we are doing today. So what do you think where it is going?
I think it'll only increase through overall because, see, globally speaking, if you look at the talent supply in India, the demand is almost 20 to 30% higher than the supply. That's also the reason why you see a lot of uptake in terms of HR tech startups focused on technology education, right? Or in terms of master's education, because we have a lot of talent graduating, but not all of it is employable or can do certain quality of work, right? So there's a huge demand supply gap. India's better positioned than the rest of the world. Now, if you are a corporate, let's say in US, the demand supply gap is even more. I think somebody was telling me that for every job, for every person employable in US, there are 4 jobs in technology, right? Is from a demand supply perspective. So you're seeing these American companies come to India, European companies come to India. Now, as these companies are coming to India, because talent is the problem, they have to work with startups this way or that way, right? Whatever today, tomorrow, they'll have to work with startups. Similarly, I think corporates are learning better how to acquire and how to invest in companies. So we have seen a consistent uptick in terms of investments happening from major Fortune 500 companies, Indian MNCs, which is there. So net, I would say there will be an uptick in all forms of activity. I think in the short run, acqui-hiring, tuck-in acquisitions, in the $5 to $50 million range will pick up really well because it's more reasonable. But yeah, overall, I think the conditions still demands them to work with startups.
So, do you think the current layoffs are actually a result of the sudden uptick in the funding available and this lack of talent pool, which led to layoffs today?
No. I think it was wrong hiring, honestly. A lot of companies have done it. It's happened in almost every industry. See, what happened was 2020, your business is growing. You need people to do it. You're not finding people. 2021.
You also have a lot of money, so you can throw money to them. Just
Exactly. And you're throwing money at it because you're like, I'll recover this investment because I'm anyways growing, right? Now, suddenly you do all of that and you realize, you know what, I've paid extra and the revenue is not growing. Suddenly I'm in a loss, right? All the ROI has reduced. in that particular part. And that's when you start seeing that, hey, look, my growth rate has shifted, or maybe this is not the way to grow the business, or I don't need so many people. So it was all hiring in the context that 2020 I could hire. So in 2021, when I got a chance, I threw everything at it, right? And people were looking for a change. They were fed up of COVID also. Everything just came together and it was making the change. 2022, everything cooled down, right? So attrition has come down, hirings have come down, everything is down on that particular part. So I think it was a lot of anticipatory hiring because they thought that we will grow, because they thought I'll not get talent. It was a lot of aggressive hiring in terms of the packages that were being offered or the deals that were being offered, and which was having an impact on the return that they were able to generate. And if you see even now, few companies are the reason for majority of the layoffs, even in the corporate world, right? And within that particular segment, what we are facing right now is a group of companies which are growing at 40-50% year on year, now growing at 18 to 20%. They're still growing. That's the funny part. It's not as if they're not growing, right? And recession for them is not growing at 30%, but growing at 20%. So it's very, very contextual. I think in India, if you still want to hire a good person, it's not easy. It's not easy to get a good engineer or a good salesperson.
Okay. Yeah. So another thing which brings me to this question is like, from the answer you gave, we're talking about the shift which happened in the sentiment and the times. So that is also the kind of acceleration health tech got because of COVID.
Yeah.
So it just suddenly got a lot of acceleration, health tech, edutech. So what do you think? Are they going to grow in the same line, or are they going to see a S curve? It is going to go stagnant and flat?
I think it'll flatten out in certain areas. This is what my sense is, and I'll give you a small example. Right? During COVID, two things happened. One was you had to do it remote, right? Second thing was people were looking for solutions and were okay with remote. Now in education, today parents don't want kids to be home the whole day, right? Now you can't change that piece. Even if you have a great XR VR solution to teach education or give education at home, because the family wants the kid to be out, right? You can't change that. Kitna bhi technology le but doesn't change, right? So it's a lot to do with behavior. I think some of those behaviors have come back, but that doesn't mean that today kids don't use tabs to learn. They have also understood that there is a value in it. There's also some use in it. We are seeing uptake of ChatGPT uses across colleges, schools. So has technology changed and will it go away completely? No. I think just the pace of growth is going to be very different. Every company will have to go back and understand what the customer desires and build a solution. Now, that being said, because the underlying issue still remains the same, that your doctor to patient ratio, teacher to student ratio is still pretty poor in a country like India. And all of us want good doctor, all of us want a good teacher. It's not as if that these markets will follow, but the bottom line is the solution expectations and desires have changed and we have to tailor to it. And that's where that flatlining will come for something. On education, healthcare should still grow.
Okay.
Maybe not
so, okay. So, but it also gave a push towards biotechnology and new technology development sector. Okay. And in particularly healthcare. What do you think? Are they also going to see a flat or not? Because they are very capital intensive. They have much longer gestation period, typically 5 to 7 years only for the development of the product. So do you think they are also going to see a flat, or?
I think they will see uptake. I think pharma healthcare is going to see in that life science is going to see uptake for sure. Because what COVID also showed was the need to be able to respond very, very rapidly to unknown scenarios and situations. Number two, funnily enough, over the decades, the time to market for a new drug has only increased. Right, if you look at the data. So there's a very, very strong focus across pharmaceutical sector to reduce the cost of development of a new drug and the time to market for a new drug. So it's about using NLP for identifying what problems to solve, using generics data and patient data to figure out the effectiveness of the molecule and its delivery. right, of being able to create sites across the world and monitor them better. So that segment I'm very optimistic about. I think it just shook the world that if you're not AstraZeneca and if you can't deliver a vaccine quickly, you've lost an opportunity. So there's a business reason to it. There's a very real, market reason to do it.
Okay. So Adit, there is one question which fits very well to you and your team particularly, because you have been supporting a lot of corporates and larger startups to help them with their corporate innovation programs. So what do you think? How well it is working out, and how good idea it is to actually run a corporate innovation program internally and do some innovation and build some good products from your internal team itself, or going for a hunt outside for a good startup?
I think it's a very good idea, and it's the best idea that you give me the money to do it. But I'm being very shameless about it. But no, I think it's important. Let me put it this way. When you're talking about innovation, we talk about three dimensions, right? Number one is scale of impact, which is incremental, transformative, breakthrough, right? So assume $1 million to billions of dollars. Then we talk about proximity to business. So is it the core, is it adjacent, or is it a new part, right? Now, every company will have to work on this section. I've seen that, okay, let's go for a new business in a, for $1 billion part. So OpenAI is like a breakthrough, say a new business area for Microsoft in that sense. But now it's integration of ChatGPT or OpenAI into Teams or into Excel or PowerPoint is transformative, a lower scale, right? But it is in the core, right? So you have to work on all the 9 boxes. Now, question is, how do you do it, right? So there are parts which is better to be done internally. There are parts which are better to be done with academia. There are parts which are better to do with your peers or with startups. The metric which we miss out is that the thing which comes before innovation is experimentation. So what you're really looking to do is increase the pace of experimentation, quality of experimentation, and you want to reduce the cost of experimentation. Now, when you think from that experimentation perspective, suddenly you realize that your CFO is not going to give me too much money after a particular point, right? They have a limitation of what I can do. The CEO is going to ask me that I want to grow my business. I want these 10 features, these 10 products. So now how do you marry the two? This is where the CTO or the tech CXO office comes into play. So it's very, very important to solve for experimentation in context of the CFO not giving money and CEO demanding more, and build capabilities across those 9 boxes. So some things are better than internally, right? And some things are better than externally. I think that's the framework one has to apply and then solve for. It's not either or. I think you need all the tools that you can get access to so that you're able to apply the right tool to the right problem. That's how I would phrase it, which is there. The reality of it remains is that today, if you do a POC with a startup, right, that POC will cost you $40,000, $50,000 net cost to company. The same product, if you want to build internally, you'll have to hire 5 people. You'll have to give them 6 months, and you'll have to give them dollars. That will turn out to be, say, $500,000. So the cost arbitrage is insane, right? Just from an experimentation perspective. So in summary, you are working across 9 boxes to solve for business growth. There are different tools for different boxes for which you want to solve, and you want as big a tool repository as possible, and then apply the right tool to the right problem.
Okay. So Prasad, Jayashri also have one question. Prasad, will you ask your question directly?
I'm always scared of professors asking questions.
No, not at all. Just a second. So the question was, there is a serious threat from MNC for startups. So what are the strategies entrepreneurs should follow so that one can avoid this issue smoothly?
It's a real problem for sure, which is there. I think there are few things that we can do before we enter, is how I would praise, just to say that, okay, what is the right to win, or what is that differentiating factor which will allow you to win, right? So for example, if I try to build a cloud storage and compute solution today, where you have a Google and a Microsoft and the AWS competing intensely to create market share, even if I try a lot more, it's going to be a losing proposition. right? So I would choose my battles very, very carefully to begin with. I think the second option is honestly just execution in that particular part. One thing which I'm never afraid of personally is that, yes, there are a lot of things that a Google can do, a lot of things that Microsoft can do, a lot of things that say Honeywell and Cisco can do, or Geo can do, for example. They just buy companies off. Right. But for them, excitement is very different. For them, they would want $1 billion revenue. But for us, $100 million revenue is still exciting. So a lot of projects don't get approved in large corporates because the revenue potential is very, very small compared to rest of their product portfolio. And those are things I would keep in mind on the positive side before I enter. But apart from that, honestly, Jayshree, I think it's all comes down to execution and being very, very aware of what your moat is and what your moat is not. And it's also to sort of understand and accept the fact that you will never be able to outspend a corporate. That's a losing battle, right? So it's guerrilla tactic, right? You can't outspend them. So just know it, accept it, and then act accordingly.
Yeah, from my side, I'll say I think the threat is reverse. MNCs are having a threat from the startups, not the startups having a threat from MNCs, because that is also there.
Yeah, it's a fun market. I think everybody's after everybody right now.
Yeah, because Zoom gave a threat to WebEx, not WebEx gave a threat to Zoom. So
I think one part which is very, very interesting though is that a lot of these enterprise products and a lot of companies have taken on corporates actually come from people who worked in same industry,
yeah.
possibly which is there. I think our advantage is speed, but effective speed is.
Yeah, so the nimbleness of a startup actually plays out the large elephant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a very good paper. So a lot of our philosophy for lean startup, for example, comes from the defense sector by this person called as Colonel Boyd, Boyd. He was part of the US Air Force. And he spoke of something called as the OODA loop, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. Right? And it's really interesting paper. It's very simple. It talks about speed very, very clearly. And what it basically says is that the time taken for a person to observe what's happening in the world, to figure out what it makes sense for them, to decide what to do, and then to do it. And it's a loop, right? The difference between a corporate and a startup is the corporate loop is much bigger and the startup loop is smaller. So this is what we call as fail fast, or the lean startup piece also, is that you iterate very, very quickly, right? Trick is, of course, the right experiments and the right way to do it. But that's the part, right? That's where we really win. So the leading metric for every startup, I would say, is that, okay, are you really experimenting and changing things for better as you fight a corporate? And this could mean your HR processes, your finance processes, your hiring process, your sales process, everything. Everything's up for discussion. But if you're iterating faster, then odds are you'll be able to beat them.
Okay. So there are a lot of reports coming which talk about coming recession and all. So what do you think? Is it going to affect startups, or is the ecosystem taking it in and a negative way and working like out some ways, or what's happening over there? Because we have been hearing about like, okay, recession is here, and we're just connecting random things together, like what is happening in Europe and what is happening with SVB in US. We're connecting them. Yeah, on very different lines, and we're connecting them and saying, look, recession is here. And ecosystem also, is it responding to it or not?
So on a lighter note, there is a new word which has come out. It's called recession.
Okay.
It's a recession of that all the high-paying jobs are where the firing is happening or the reduction is happening, but your blue-collar jobs are seeing increase in pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I think IESE or one of these business schools came up with this word to explain the phenomena. I think this discussion around recession, I would not dismiss it. There is definitely a construct where a lot of businesses are again having to rethink how to sell and how to build, because a lot of COVID time changes are also reversing. Those behaviors are also reversing, or a new behavior is emerging, right? So the playbook has to be rewritten. I think a lot of companies made a lot of fundamental mistakes in 2022. I'll give you a small example. In 2020, during Christmas, there was a huge buying which happened in US. In 21, also there was a good amount of buying happened. In 22, people assumed the same data will work. What they forgot, now people have to travel. What they forgot is that they've already bought enough number of things. What they forgot is now they're going out, so they're spending a lot more money on drinks and on dinners, right? Consequently, they're not going to buy the same amount of quantity in Christmas. So certainly you had stockouts, you had oversupply coming in, right? And because there's oversupply, money was stuck, so they stopped giving orders to China and India. And everybody said, hey, we are not able to export anything to US. It's a planning failure, right? Because of wrong data referencing. So I think what we are seeing is recession in terms of world readjusting to what post-COVID really means. And thinking about how you build about the business. What we are seeing is with the Fed rates increasing, with these planning cycles changing, with behaviors again changing, is what we are experiencing right now. I think it's important to remember that recession means slower growth, does not mean degrowth. Those are two very, very different things. And from a startup perspective, I think the market is still there. The most material impact for a startup right now is the fact that certain leaders are using recession as an excuse to either not take decisions or to take certain decisions which they would not have taken earlier. So there's a very strong efficiency play. So if you're not critical to your customer, odds are you will get kicked out, right? But if you see the reason of critical, non-critical is a very fundamental reason, right? Similarly, they're negotiating a lot more or taking longer time from decision is a cycle time perspective. So yes, there is an impact. I would not say there's no impact per se. My sense right now, and I'm hoping I'm right, is that this is an overreaction to the term recession than the recession itself, what we are facing currently. There is still room to solve a lot of problems that we are facing as a world. So yeah, I mean, there is a problem right now. But as far as startups I talk to are concerned, for them, it's not again a live or die situation. Right now, they seem to be taking it in stride.
Okay, so what do you suggest to a new entrepreneur? Okay, are the trends positive for him or negative?
I think positive. One problem is, yeah, I'm an optimist, which is there.
Same here. Highly capitalist, highly optimist.
Yeah. I think the trends are good. I think the trends are good. What 2022 has taught us is that the first principles of fundamentals of building business has not changed. What it has taught us is that valuations will shift, values will not shift. And if you're true to those principles, you will be able to weather the storm, right? I think that's the only difference. It has taught us that if you look at your peers, then just understand what they're doing, but don't copy them, right? Or you might make the same mistakes. You take your own decisions. It has reinforced a lot of fundamentals, I think, that way. If somebody is able to keep that in mind, I think there is still enough problems to solve, enough capital that you can get access to. There are a lot of rich people in the world today who want to become more rich, right? So the capital is there. But yeah, you have to stay true to the first principles. That's the biggest learning, at least for me, or with any entrepreneur who has survived 2022 really well.
Okay, so that takes me to another side of the talk, which is more by the government. Okay, so like we're talking about the availability of the talent pool, the push in terms of interest rates, and also if you see these all are somehow connected with the government and the policies. Okay, and that is where I have a few apprehensions in my head. Like, what does government want from the ecosystem? Like, they're saying startup India and Atmanirbhar Bharat and everything, but at the same time, the way taxation is moving, at the same time, we have issues with ESOPs. Okay, I had met Nirmala Sitharaman as well, and like shared the same concerns. There was no positive response coming in. So like there are like certain things happening that side as well. So what do you think is the major challenges of the government and for the government for this startup ecosystem? For example, in last 5 years or 10 years, last one decade, uh, government pushed a lot towards computer science and IT education, right? And somehow we missed a lot onto other engineering streams. Mm. And then the same is now haunting us when we are talking about a $12 billion investment to have our national foundry. We don't have talent pool to run a foundry now. Mm. So, like, what do you think are the challenges for the government and by the government to the ecosystem?
I think some of the pieces with the government, what we have to also remember is that if we were in the government, how would we solve for it, right? Let me put it that way. So if you look at the core of angel tax issues is the fact that they are worried about money laundering.
Mm.
So when we are asking for angel tax benefits, right, we are not able to really go back to the government with a solution, which is, hey, look, this approach ensures that everybody will get equal participation and there'll be no money laundering issues happening, right? We have not been able to, I think, somewhere factor that in terms of our recommendations to the government as to how to solve the problem, which is there, right? So, for example, yes, we are building Aadhaar and we are building UPI and we are building OCN and, account aggregator. Why can't we digitalize the whole MCA?
Yeah.
Because then you don't do it, a lot of these things won't happen, right? Which is there. So, and I think that is where the role of folks like what iSpirit did 10 years back in terms of
Mm.
conversing with the government, sitting with them, working out the solution, not leaving the solution to them, working out the solution for the problem, bringing the right people is what we need to do continuously in India, because we have to admit and assume that even if we have a ruling party which is really, really inclined to support us, they do not have the capability to solve everything. And we have to keep that in mind and then work from there. At the core, what government would always want is something which is a headline, unfortunately, across the world, right? And that headline today is connected to jobs, it's connected to economic growth of the society, it's connected to more dollars coming in everybody's pocket. Unfortunately, not a holistic growth element, right? Which is there. That's why, on one side we have, that, Golden India kind of a story, and then also doing extremely bad on a lot of developmental indexes which are there. So I would say it's a tricky part to be in the government, but I think the solution lies in something similar to what we did when Aadhaar was launched and when UPI was launched, that a group of people sort of dedicated themselves to find a solution with the government and build from there. Money laundering is a real problem in India, right? Shell companies have been a real problem in India. We also hate it, right? The recent episode that all of us got, which got covered in media, was a lot to do with those Shell, right? So we also hate it. So that's where the balancing act really is. The other part is, I think, where maybe we need to figure out as a government part is that because it's about headlines, two opposition parties at two different sources of power end up solving the same thing. So let me give you a small example. When the Startup India policy was announced and every state had to launch startup policy, unfortunately, majority state just copy pasted it. Very few states really, wrote their own policy from scratch and had to follow through, like say Telangana has done, right? In terms of, doing it again and again and improving, iterating on it. I think that's what our reality, unfortunately, is. That's what we have to hold, the government also accountable to say, look, any policy and every policy is not acceptable, which is there. The last part is, I think there's a very, very good book in terms of what is the role that the government has to play in a particular sector, particular industry. I think we need to look at government not as market makers, but as friction removers, where they allow a set of people who are of the country to solve a certain set of problems, but their role is to basically say, look, I'll enable the roof, but not at the cost of Atit getting hurt. That is the role of the government, right? Government can't come and tell Dhruv what to learn and what to study, because he will then become successful in future, or tell Atit what to study. It has to be an enabler and removing friction. That's how at least I see it. So yes, we can have them spend on IT, but to your point, right? The reason they're spending on IT is because certain body advocated spend on IT, while the other body missed out advocating spend on core sciences. Right? So
Yes.
that's the trick.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Which are the places, in particularly education? Because like somehow I'm sitting inside an education institute. An education institute is supporting this program. So, which are the directions in education we can adopt now with the new education policy already in place? So, what do you think are the academic directions we should look into?
I think the core sciences will be very, very important. Right. And the revolution that plastic got in this world is unparalleled compared to a lot of other things. The contribution of a washing machine coming into the world and bringing a whole set of population into the workforce is unparalleled, right? So I think we need to look at innovation impact in a different way. And in that sense, I think core sciences will be very critical. A lot of development will happen when the material changes. I think similarly, the core elements of the software aspect of the society, which is the economics, the finance, the psychology part, is going to be equally important as we go into the newer world. So I think this is the time when you keep going back to basics. There's a lot of investment focus and momentum in technology, so to say. But within technology, to your point, right? How do we go one level lower, which is there? The typical tendency is to go upstream, right? Because that seems a lot more easier. But the trick right now is to go downstream, is to go back. Is how I would simplify it. So go back to the basics. And that's where the real money is, right? Statistics became such a big thing, certainly because data science came into play.
Yes. Yes.
Right? A small example. Mathematicians are in vogue like never before.
Okay, so I'll move to a few of the questions coming from the audience. One is about the scalability. Okay, so we have not seen much of the startups from India going global or scaling very fast, like globally. A couple of examples, particularly B2C, if we see. So we only have a couple of examples. One is like Paytm, which moved to Canada, but they didn't expand it any further. So what do you think? One is the scalability, and because I always believe in scalability is not an equation of your solution, is more of a equation of your business model. So like one is scalability, and the second thing is about the maturity of this ecosystem. So how mature do you think that? I see somehow these two things are related, so that's why I'm clubbing them together. Yeah.
I think almost, if I'm not wrong, almost 30% of the startup ecosystem is already exporting the solution, so to say. It's purely on the B2B part, to your point, not so much on the B2C part, which is there. And I think it's okay. Right. I'm personally, yes, I would love to, see Fab India products being sold in US and, Ola winning US market. But I think it's okay if you are able to corner a country and are able to build in a country like India, you will eventually have avenues to go abroad. I think we should remember that Airtel took a while to go international, right? Tata's or even Ambani's in that sense on the B2C side have taken a while to go international. And some of the biggest brands there are not gone international yet. But they're really, really powerful brands that every global company wants to partner with. So I think as India as a whole on the B2C side, we are still learning that part. From a tech perspective, I think B2B is giving us a better inroads given the fact that services was global always, and the product part is becoming globalized. So with about say 30% of your solutions already in international market, I think we're in the right direction. It'll take some time. It won't happen immediately, but Freshworks, ChargePeace, Sonoti, iCertis, MoEngage, WebEngage, it's a long list of companies today which have a lot of global reputation and respect. Zoho, majority business comes from outside India, right? So I think we're in the right direction. And on the B2B side, I think we might see a lot of success. We have seen that, by the way, on the Indian conglomerates also, right? Early days, to your point, but in the right direction. There are certain areas where we don't have an advantage. Take for example, in Israeli Defense Forces, their focus on cybersecurity is a very fundamental thing. We did not have that, but now we have Defense Forces at least being open to looking at solutions from Indian startups, right? And I think there's a very good article on one of the Indian startups, which was in defense, which wanted to sell to DRDO and so wanted to sell to Indian Defense Forces. Unfortunately, they could not get a contract. They eventually sold to Israeli Defense Forces and then came to. So even we don't accept solutions, right? Even we don't allow our companies to sell and then allow them to go global by giving them business. We prefer global pieces. So it's a lot to do with behavior. But at the core of it, I think 30% is a significant number. A good chunk of these companies are in the $20 to $100 billion revenue range. It's a respectable revenue range. And we should see that improve consistently. And that's where I think your ecosystem maturity part comes in. I think if you look at the number of companies which have more than $100 million revenue ARR, $3 million ARR and $10 million ARR, in the last 2 years, it's been a jump. It's almost 3x, 4x jump. We are coming up with a report with Charate. And what we noticed is that in every bucket, the number of companies now present are almost 3x to 4x higher than 2020, 2019. So I think we are heading in the right direction for sure.
Okay. So this is a question particularly from a founder because he saw something in your slide that the funding in the automotive sector is going down. So he's asking, is there an expectation from when sectors like mobility will spring back in terms of investments? Because suddenly every startup, every investor is saying no to EVs.
Saying no to EVs or in terms of, okay. See, I think
I'm hearing it out from every investor. They're like, if it is an EV, no. Like rest all is okay, but EV, no.
Yeah, I think EV, you might see a lot of competition in OEM, somebody trying to be an OEM in electric vehicles, but if you're still a tier 1, tier 2, there's a lot of interest. Because battery management or motors or battery itself or connected, machines, I think there's still a lot of headroom. Every automotive major I know is trying to look for a startup in these areas, right? Because you just don't find talent to build EV solutions per se. On the OEM side, I can understand because you have Ola building, you have Ather building, you have Bounce building, you have Yulu building, you have everybody building, right? So how many brands can you sustain? To give you a small example, I think 90s we had, Hero Honda be there and Bajaj Kawasaki and, TVS Suzuki and all these brands came in. Very few survived. So every market has a number of brands which can really survive. So in that sense, I think there would be a pushback. But I think EV holds a lot of interest for sure overall. In terms of automotive mobility, the fundamental issue was that the sector in general wasn't doing really well, right? So if you see automotive players have already started to do well, like Toyota selling more cars or Suzuki selling more cars. So if people are not traveling, the sector is down, you can't really do much. Similarly with mobility also, right? Yulu, for example, is doing really well, but they realize the shift has to be not consumers, but the delivery partners, right?
Yes.
And certainly it does make a lot more sense for somebody to sort of, focus on. So I think what to the founder's question, I think autonomous driving, electric vehicle, under the hood, tier 1, tier 2, there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of room for growth. It's still not very, very efficient. There's a lot of push for capacity, manufacturing capacity in India of certain quality, which is there. But what you're really facing is the sectoral headwinds, which are really slowing things down. Yeah. So don't give up just yet, right? But then if you're not able to really pitch that you are a better scooter than Ola, or why the world needs one more scooter, or why will you win because there are 10 more scooter companies, then all the investors will say no, right? I mean, you can't blame them right now at this particular juncture.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, this question relates to me and Professor as well. So, how can IIT and IIMs or top B schools play a bigger role in building a strategic bridge between various stakeholders and budding entrepreneurs? So, this talk like everybody comes to me say, "Yeah, tum to IIT, so you get everything. You have money, you have space, you get good startups as well." But what do you think? How we can do better?
I think it's just like we have to do few things, but we have to do them really well. Just some startups को बोलते हैं something similar, right? And then be known for something. I think iTIC is on a good journey that way. So the problem is not the money. The problem is attention, right? With all these stakeholders and the peers that you orchestrate. Problem is the attention part, which is there, and that's how I think I would go about. Is to be known for something. I think what journey IIT Hyderabad is on right now with automotive healthcare, I take initiatives in general, it seems to be in that direction. To me, right? I think one good example, if I have to look outside IITs into non-technology institutes, I would say IIM Ahmedabad with the CIE was very, very good in terms of the focus that they have had. So I think it's time to solve for attention, not for connects, because connects don't do anything after a point. You need to keep solving for attention, then solve for connects accordingly. So yeah, I mean, through Abato, what more can you do for us?
Okay, so like yeah, we have this thing here. IITs are territorial in nature. Okay, so we have our own expertise. We work silently over there. One thing is we don't make much noise like what other private incubators make. So that is one thing. And yes, most of the talent which comes to us, most of the startups are coming to us are not from IITs and IIMs themselves actually. So like we have supported 138 startups till today, and I'll be wrong if I'm saying not more than 24 are having founders from the premier institutes of the country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So and that too, when our selection ratio for last financial year was 1 out of 22. So like it's not like the pipeline is not there, or it's not like others we are not there. It's like we are too focused. We're keeping our head down and working. We're not making much noise. I think that is one thing I would like to take from here. Like we should also make ourselves visible.
I would agree to that. I would agree to that for sure, because I think at least I personally know of a couple of initiatives at IIT Hyderabad or take for example at Kanpur, which are really interesting, and I think which are very, very fundamental, and people need to know for sure. And I think I'll allude to the attention part here, maybe that I think there's also a challenge for IITs, and Dhruv, you would agree with this, is that traditionally academic incubators haven't had or the programs haven't had success rate, right? So you're also fighting that part, and people don't even try to dig up more information. So that marketing becomes even more important.
So that is somewhere not in our DNA. So like we have to bring it in. So like being an academic incubator, we like, even I personally, like when I say I'm a capitalist, like people look at it from a separate eye. So they're like, oh, okay. So what a capitalist is doing inside an IIT. So all the like we have great success stories coming out from IIT Madras, IIT Bombay. Okay, like Idea 4 is from IIT Bombay. They are hoping a larger exit from them. Yeah, so all that is there. But I think like particularly people expect we to be a bridge between government and the startup, which I think somebody more like you can do rather than us, who can actually make policy interventions.
I mean, we try to do our bit. We at least try to convey what the world requires and how to look at that, which is there. I think what the question might be alluding to is that we need socialist capitalist incubators of India. Something similar.
So we need to work out on our own business model. Okay, so we have one more question I'll take, which is on how's the green tech, clean tech going to work out? Because you say there is a lot more emphasis on the environment, but I feel like in particular green tech and clean tech, and not just from the consumer point of view, also from the B2B point of view. We had seen a few good companies coming and working on effluent treatment, like complete zero liquid discharge from an industry or something, so or carbon capture. So how it is going to work out for them? What do you see the trend to be?
I think, look, it's not going to be easy. So assume that you will have a lot of global competition in these areas, but it's a very big opportunity. There's a fair bit of capital available for grants and for investments and for revenue. So it's a very real opportunity. But don't assume it'll be easy for sure, right? There are a lot of smart people across the world trying to focus on this. But I think it's almost every second day through, let me put this way, that at least one corporate talks to me with something around climate, right? There is a climate angle in almost every company that I speak to. Whether you talk about CCUS, you talk about supply chain, you talk about circular economy, you talk about recycling, you talk about converting waste to energy or waste to something, right, or third party solution. People are open. And what I mean is that don't assume it's easy. Is that say, let's take for example, you're in carbon capture and you're talking to a Japanese company. They will, when they're building a case internally, they have to compare you to the Israeli startup. They have to compare you to the European startup. It is our reality. We cannot dismiss it. We cannot say we are best in India and consequently give me a contract for US. It doesn't work that way, right? So that's for us to solve as entrepreneurs and as ecosystem. But it's very real. Simple one statement. It's very, very real opportunity.
Okay. So this is the last question, and I'll be open on it. Like, you can avoid not to answer it. Okay. So the question is, even I'm not able to understand how much it is going to impact us. But yeah, in recent, there are talks about rupee being the primary mode of exchange for many neighboring countries. How does it affect the startups and the businesses? When we are also talking about no imports from the import ban from the neighboring countries with whom we share our land borders. So that is also another sentiment. So what do you think?
On the tech side, I think anything which happens with the neighbor will be good for the sector. The whole tech ecosystem is very, very pro-India in that particular sense, globally. Especially given the whole cybersecurity piece happening, from the east, which is there. So I think with the rupee as the primary mode of transaction, see what it does basically, is that it removes a certain uncertainty in your business financials, right? And in that sense, I think it doesn't really change anything for the tech sector because most of our exports come from Europe and US, right? If you see from a territorial region perspective. So I could be wrong, but in my limited opinion right now, and maybe I need to study this a bit more for sure, is that the current construct doesn't change anything fundamental for the tech sector. It'll have segments on the business that we do on these particular trade routes and how that really changes. With rupee getting more prominence, does it really change the view for the whole country? Again, maybe not. Not in the near term. It's a good step in the right direction for the long term. It has a material impact on certain imports, exports that we do, but not on the tech side so much.
Okay. So this is all from my side. If you have anything, any question for us, you can ask it, or then I'll go back to for suggestion.
No, I'm good. I think I'll catch you on a separate time, in person. But thank you so much. This was fun. Yeah.